like many other people out there, there's always in the back of my mind that impending doom scripture of, you know, I'm going to kill you, your children, and your children's children. And don't tell me that you haven't done it, because I know for myself that I've gone into my room to, you know, have a prayer session and flick open the Bible and it's there. So I think by now we've kind of all just agreed to try and flick through to the New Testament to make sure that we've got the good ones. But, you know, I think today I just want to try and discover where the grace is within God's wrath, and why that word wrath, you know, is really even in the Bible. I mean, if God is a God of love and a God who adores us, like John says, then why is it that we have in our minds an image of a God who is like a Zeus darting bullets at us every time we have a bad thought? So, you know, I think with everything that you read in the Bible, you do need to read it in context and in light of the finished works of the cross. So before Jesus came on the scene, we lived and conducted ourselves in the passions of our flesh. We couldn't help ourselves. Our behaviour was literally governed by sin. So we were then, by nature, children of his wrath and heirs of his indignation. So that's what it says in Ephesians, I think it's 2:10. So we might as well have been slaves to sin itself. But to understand why we were like this, you have to go back to Genesis and look at when the first temptation was when Eve ate the apple. So the serpent comes and tempts Eve by saying, if you eat of this tree, you will become like God. And so she does, but in doing so, she's actually forgotten that God had already created her to be like him. So the sin wasn't so much as that she actually ate the apple, but more so that she forgot who she was, and she forgot that she was already godlike and already made perfect. But what I find interesting is the word sin primarily means to miss the mark, but it's also linked to words such as guilt, forget, and iniquity. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think we've all gotten into that thought pattern of sin is an action opposed to a mindset. So have you ever wondered why, when they did actually eat the apple and God approached them and said, who told you that you were naked? Why are you covering yourselves up? You know, it was like he was saying, I created all things perfect. Even in your nakedness, your most vulnerable state, you are perfect and you are carefree. Now that you have known sin just this very once, you have shame, and you see your nakedness as something that's actually to be covered. Now, I'm a strong believer that God never wanted his children to entertain guilt within their minds, but it did because of sin. And it proves to me that wrath is first revealed in our minds and then in our actions. For example, if you've got a child who attends school, and if he's a lazy one, such as what I was, you don't really pay attention to what's being taught in the class. So ultimately, if you don't pay attention, you don't learn. And if you don't learn, you don't get a good job eventually. And if you don't get a good job, you don't earn your wages to support yourself and to buy food. And ultimately, if you don't have your food and your nutrition, you will eventually die. You can't live without food. So that's kind of, just a little example of what I mean. But it's pivotal, and this is why it's pivotal, to know and accept and acknowledge that you already have got the mind of Christ within you. So often we walk without, self-remembrance, to the point where we completely forget who we are and completely forget that we are the image of God, and that he's within us, and that our minds have been transformed into the mind of Christ already, that we wear his righteousness already. Just like Eve forgot, we are exactly the same today, but Christ came so that we no longer have that sin mindset. We live in the holiness that he's freely given to us. Let me just gather my notes here for a moment. But I think, even in the Old Testament, I think the wrath is obviously very much spoken of, but even in the New Testament, it also says it as well. So you might be thinking about, I think it was Romans 1:18-20, where it talks about God's wrath, and it actually says, for God's holy wrath is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness of men, who in their wickedness hinder the truth. Now that was in Romans, so I thought by now, being Paul as well, that in the New Testament everything was all peachy. But if you reread it, it actually mentions the word revealed. Okay. It actually mentions the word revealed, which in Greek is apocalypse. So to all those end time warriors out there, we may already be in the apocalypse because it means revealing. So the word revealed is a present passive, which indicates that it actually denotes a continuous revelation of God. So, for example, if it was written differently and it said something like, for God's holy wrath is being revealed from heaven, then it will be a completely different story. But what it's basically indicating is that it's already been revealed. His wrath has already been revealed, which obviously was pre-Christ. So really, it's just showing you what it was to how it is now, and that's the celebration of what Jesus' blood has done. The only reason why we turn back and look at our sin is to remember how good he is, and to remember how free we are now that he has done what he has done. So, when Jesus came, he took upon the sins of the world, and through this, God's wrath was completely, fully satisfied. And I know it's a hard thing for people to understand, that God had wrath against his only son, but at that moment in time, he saw it as sin, and he saw it as sin being crucified to that cross, and we were on that cross with Jesus as well. But it was done. Sin was upon that cross that day, and the moment that blood touched the sand, the moment that he breathed his last breath, was the moment that we would be joined into union with him. Where did our sin go? It's completely vanished. It's completely torn apart. The power, it has no power anymore. It's got no power to get into our minds and to torment us any longer. So, when he rose, we rose in newness of life. And when he died, we died. So it was all this completely effortless union that we have with him. It's been completely eradicated now, that sin. So I feel, in essence, the only reason why wrath was there in the first place was for God to demonstrate his great love and his great mercies that he has towards us. It was never intended to condemn people. It was intended to condemn the sin, because everything that Jesus does, everything that God does, is all to show his mercy and to show his love and to show his passion towards us. So, I think in general, if you're still thinking that you're in sin, if you're still thinking that you've got this problem that is everlasting and it's only going to get better when you finally arrive through those pearly gates, and I'm sorry, but I think you're living in a fantasy land. If we have our minds truly conditioned to the mind of Christ, we will no longer have this problem of these identity crises, which so many Christians have. And, think what you will, this is what I've been, taught, and I haven't just kind of gone and followed the other people who are listening to this grace message too. I've searched it out for myself. I've spoken to God about it. This is what I believe, and I just hope and pray that this year everybody else can just come to that realization of that effortless union within Christ. And I love you guys, and have a wonderful evening. See ya.